Alright, I think you owe us all an explanation. What was that dude doing in my last review?
Man, I told you, stop calling him that. His name is Mr. Crow. If you don't address him properly, I'm not gonna answer your questions, comprende?
Okay, what was Mr. Crow doing in my Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen review?
Man, that's a lot of pressure to deliver these answers, but you better listen, okay?
Proceed.
The man, Mr. Crow, is not our enemy, but he is what stands between us and our destination, comprende?
So you're saying he's just like a sub-boss and there's a more powerful entity to face?
No, it's like he's the more powerful one, and the main boss is a bit of a disappointment, comprende?
Okay, so what will bring him out? How do we know he's going to appear again?
I don't know, Papa, but listen, I'm gonna come and create a plan, and you're gonna figure out. When the time comes, I'm going to approach you, and you'll know exactly what you'll need to do, comprende?
Alright, so I guess it's just status quo then. I'm gonna review Dungeon Siege 3, so I'm gonna do that, and I guess I'll see you later, unless you interrupt me for the millionth time.
Okay, Papa, have a good one.
For me, the focus of 2021 has been about looking back to the past to finally take a look at games that have been left by the wayside. Either these games I've outright promised to review directly, or games that I have been waiting to review for a while, but never got around to it for one reason or another. Today, we are going to finally complete the Dungeon Siege trilogy with Dungeon Siege 3. I'm just gonna be honest with you, I really wasn't keen on looking at this one. Dungeon Siege 1 and 2 are solid titles, with 2 being my favorite with all the things added. Dungeon Siege 3, however, took everything about the first 2 and basically threw it out the window, as well as it being console focused.
Will the series ever return? I honestly don't know at this point. Despite it being a disappointing sequel, are there some redeeming qualities? Either way, let's dive in as we finally return to the world of Ebb with Dungeon Siege 3.
You start out the game and are given an opening cinematic. Even though this is visually unimpressive and falls under a fairly standard generic fantasy narrative, I really enjoy the stylistic choice here. It basically reminds me of the old school Elder Scrolls intros. You then have to choose one of 4 characters, and yes, you can no longer create your own character, which was a huge point of contention. While each character here is viable and definitely varied from each other, you'll be stuck in a very limited playstyle throughout the game, which is honestly one of the biggest issues in this game. I ultimately chose Anjali since she was a spear user and had an alternative fire elemental form, which sounds like a pretty interesting melee and magic hybrid. Depending on the character you had chose will determine the dialogue you have with other NPCs, which is a nice touch. Once you get control of yourself, you get a pretty decent tutorial of what the game has to offer, as well as the controls. I initially was using the keyboard and mouse, but quickly switched to using a controller. You'll also notice the graphics, which are pretty solid for the time. Aesthetically, however, the game feels uninspired and looks like it's trying to copy the Fable art style verbatim. My other issues with the animations during dialogue. People make fun of the Mass Effect Andromeda faces, but that was mainly due to programming errors. This is legit the game working as intended, and the characters move and act robotic as hell.
God bless the 7th generation of consoles.
Amen, Papa.
Similar to many ARPGs, combat is a huge part of it. Here, it feels solid enough and works as intended. You have a focus meter that fills up by performing basic attacks, which is basically mashing the A button. This focus can then be used to perform abilities. Every character has 2 forms they can switch to. For Anjali, she can switch to her fire form, which allows her to use fireballs. I was honestly disappointed with this, as I expected her to have a bit more going on regarding the magic, but it's incredibly simplistic with fireball spam and her abilities, which take way too freaking long to activate and can easily get her killed. Blocking and rolling is weird since they are both mapped to the same button. You hold left trigger to block, but roll by holding that same button and using the left analog stick. A better alternative for rolling would have been to use the right analog stick, since blocking feels cumbersome and hard to face your opponent.
Which, for how fragile Anjali is, this is necessary.
Also read that a lot of people complained about the camera controls, but it was fine for me. You basically use the right analog stick to control it. While I do wish I can zoom out a bit more, especially during co-op play, it wasn't enough to be a detriment to me. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to try the multiplayer, but the game features drop-in and drop-out co-op, which is a first for the series. A majority of the time, co-op can help make a game much more enjoyable, and this is no exception. The same flaws with the combat will still exist, but at least you have some fun with a buddy. Although, there are some questionable design decisions since the progression is only tied to the host account, which will not help in your campaign.
It's a shame because a game like Champions of Norath allowed you to create a character and put it in another person's campaign. Granted, it was exploitative as hell, but there you go.
Hey, Papa, you wanna play the game together? Man, we make a great team. Remember your Dark Souls 2 review when we took down Andre? Man, those were the good old days.
First off, no. Second of all, that happened in 2020, so this good old days thing, I have no clue what you're talking about.
Man, why you so mean? No wonder you don't have any friends.
I also just don't like the way party combat is handled. When it comes to AI partners, you can only have one companion at a time. This is a missed opportunity having all the heroes fighting together at once, but I'm guessing this was done for balance reasons?
Either that or just a bad design decision.
The companion AI itself is solid as a meat shield, but God forbid if you actually rely on it to do any sort of damage. While you can equip the best equipment on them, you have no control which weapon they will use nor the active skills. The AI seems to switch stances randomly with no rhyme or reason, and there's no way to adjust this. Similar to many action RPGs of this kind, you'll find a ton of randomized loot, some of it pretty helpful while others are pretty basic. It's pretty easy to compare the stats of one item to another in the equipment screen. However, it isn't easily explained what some of these stats mean unless you look at the help section. Unfortunately, the equipment you'll find does not make much of a visual difference. This is mainly hampered by how limited each character is in what they can do. Along with finding loot, you can also buy equipment from various vendors in the world. The problem I have is most of what you find in the stores is overpriced, and it's far better to find it in combat. You'll eventually have a crap ton of gold with nothing meaningful to really spend it on unless you want that +1 attack bonus.
While everything seems pretty fine and harmless at this point, this is really when it shows how limited this game is.
When you level up, you're automatically taken to a screen to upgrade yourself. The first time you level up, you'll realize that there are only 9 abilities to play with per character. 3 defensive, 3 for the first form, and 3 for the second form. Basically, it doesn't really matter what you pick since you will unlock all abilities eventually.
And some of the later abilities that you'll get will make the old ones basically useless and make the game so easy. Which, honestly, this game is already easy, even without these OP abilities.
The next thing you do is level up your proficiencies, which can make your abilities more useful or virtually do nothing noticeable. Then there's the talent system, which, good lord, is one of the most uninspired passive skill systems I have ever seen. Similar to the abilities, a majority is locked out until you reach a certain level, which will take a while. The percentages for many of these are so freaking small that you'll barely notice a difference until many level ups.
Honestly, my biggest pet peeve of gaming is when something increases by like 1% or such a small margin that you really don't notice a difference. Dungeon Siege 3 has some of the worst progression, and honestly by the end, you don't really feel that much stronger.
Come on, Cap, you can't beat me. I mean, just look at this sword. It got 1% attack speed increase. Can't beat that.
That may be the case, but these guns give me 2% penetration chance.
As you play through the game, you'll have main quests and side quests to participate in. Depending on what you accomplish will be recorded as a deed, which will boost your stats for at least a noticeable amount. These quests will also involve dialogue, which is fine for the most part. Some offer different choices which can alter certain things down the line, along with the previously mentioned deeds. The voice acting is once again fine for the most part, outside of a few questionable performances. The more noticeable issue, as mentioned before, are the strange robotic animations during conversations. But even with all the side quests to do, the game feels incredibly linear as all hell. The level design allows for barely any kind of exploration, nor any encouragement towards it. There aren't really any secrets to find, and even if there was something out there, the reward for most of the time is very negligible.
So I originally was also going to review the DLC called Treasures of the Sun, but honestly, I'm so freaking bored playing and talking about this game. Let's just wrap this up.
Forget the fact that this is a Dungeon Siege title. Even if it was called something else, the game is just simply lackluster. The RPG elements are incredibly light, There's a lack of flexibility in the characters, the enemy variety is low, and it simply lacks enjoyment. I didn't even finish Dungeon Siege 1 when I reviewed it, but got relatively far compared to this game. The repetition and boredom set in far too early, diminishing any return of coming back.
I mean, just in my hand alone, I have so many better quote-unquote console RPGs. I mean, right here I got Diablo 3 for the 360, a lot of fun with this one. And also Champions of Norath 1 and 2 for the PS2, which are just absolute classics. Speaking of, I think I might as well just play one of these. Anyways, thank you guys for watching as always, and this is Pow3rh0use, signing off.